Despite what has been already mentioned in our discussions, Egypt, and since the beginning of this conflict on the 7th of October, has been reiterating at the highest levels its condemnation of the targeting of civilians, whomever they are. We firmly condemn the targeting of civilians, but despite all that, destruction in the Gaza Strip has reached unprecedented levels. More than 15,000 Palestinian civilians were killed, including 6,000 children and 4,000 women. More than half of the residential buildings in the Strip were destroyed. The whole health system has been targeted. Two-thirds of the population has been displaced. Concurrently with the ongoing blockade, starvation, closure of the Israeli crossing points, and restriction of humanitarian access. These acts constitute grave and blatant violations of international law and international humanitarian law. It is a true humanitarian tragedy that cannot be justified under any pretext. However, surprisingly enough, some states that pretend to defend international law and human rights refrain from describing what is happening as a violation of international humanitarian law. They simply call for the respect of international humanitarian law, and their calls are left unanswered. The concept of self-defense cannot be invoked in grave violations of international humanitarian law. What right of self-defense would allow the occupying force to oppress, to destroy the lives of the occupied people? Which international laws legitimize self-defense against the same people languishing under occupation? International law demands the occupying state to respect the occupied people's humanity and basic needs. Mr. President, we have warned against the danger of targeting civilians in the Gaza Strip. However, the Israeli conduct for more than 50 days can only be interpreted as a deliberate policy to make life in the Gaza Strip impossible by targeting civilian and medical facilities, residential buildings, and pushing the inhabitants of the north to evacuate towards the south of the Strip, which is already densely populated and has been suffering from a harsh blockade for years. The policy of forcible displacement and mass transfer was rejected by the whole world. It represents a violation of international law. This policy is still the aim of Israel, not only through the statements and calls of the Israeli officials, but also by creating a new dire reality on the ground to expel the Palestinians of Gaza from their land and liquidate their cause by isolating the people from their land and confiscating it. This is happening in full view of the international community, which has failed repeatedly to put an end to annexation, demolition, settlements, and extrajudicial killings, which are all unlawful practices happening amidst the silence of the international community. Meanwhile, the occupying state persists in these practices. Mr. President, what is happening in Gaza, in full view of the world, is also happening in the West Bank. The same policy is expelling the Palestinians from the West Bank, either by unleashing the violence of settlers or through demolitions, expulsions, and military incursions in the towns of the West Bank, in addition to the annexation of land through systematic settlements that consolidate the illegal occupation. Egypt reaffirms before your Council its total rejection of any intent, plan, or attempt at liquidating the Palestinian cause by transferring the Palestinian people from their land occupied since 1967. Egypt warns against the consequences of such a conduct on peace in the region as a whole. Egypt calls the international community to stand firmly against all the practices which could lead to such a situation. Mr. President, today or the day after, that is the question. The answer is clear, based on logic and on international law. There is an urgent need to end this bloody war, to save lives, to protect civilians from the scourge of war, before contemplating the day after. Egypt is currently working on the implementation of the Security Council resolution pertaining to humanitarian pauses. Egypt succeeded in cooperation with Qatar and the United States in brokering a hostage and prisoners exchange that also includes assistance delivery to the north and south of Gaza. Egypt will continue its efforts to extend the pause, to reach a ceasefire, and to put an end to war and destruction. We call upon the Security Council to support these efforts and also to support holding the perpetrators responsible for the crimes they have committed against civilians, whomever they are. Since day one, Egypt has called for the release of civilian hostages and condemned any targeting of innocent civilians. We wonder, however, what is the position of the international community and of the Security Council vis-à-vis the Palestinian prisoners, the children and women who for years have been imprisoned in harsh conditions without charges or trials. Aren't those as well hostages taken by the occupying state? Furthermore, we are working with our partners and the committee that was created during the Arab Islamic Summit held in Riyadh to secure humanitarian access to the Gaza Strip. In this context, we have tabled a draft resolution before the Council. This draft resolution is not politicized. It solely focuses on the humanitarian aspect and on saving 2.5 million innocent people in Gaza. We urge you to look positively at this draft resolution and to rise to the level of responsibility that this unprecedented humanitarian tragedy entails. We also urge to increase the scope of humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza. What has been provided so far, and Egypt has contributed 70% of that assistance, so what has been offered so far does not answer the needs of 2.5 million Palestinians. We also urge you to avoid double standards and to turn your sympathizing statements with the people of Gaza into action. Furthermore, we consider any objection to this approach as an endorsement of the blockade of starving women and children, denying them shelter and basic health care in extremely harsh conditions with the approaching winter. As for the day after, although the picture is not clear yet, considering the ambiguous goals of the current war, we believe that the only alternative is to address the root causes of the conflict and of all the sufferings we are witnessing today. There is a need to address the Palestinian cause in an integrated and comprehensive manner that would put an end to occupation. Anything less, and the results of our collective efforts will remain temporary. New cycles of violence will unfold, and peace and security will not prevail in the region, including in Israel. There's a need to put aside all vain statements and work hand in hand to implement the only internationally agreed upon solution, which is the two-state solution. This solution should be enforced and saved, not only supported by statements. At the same time, the member states that haven't done so yet should recognize the state of Palestine. I call upon your august Council to accept the full membership of Palestine at the United Nations. This lies at the core of the Council's mandate pursuant to the UN Charter. In conclusion, to all the actors interested in the day after, yes, it is time to work seriously. We stand ready to cooperate with anyone, with no exception, to set up a political framework and take the necessary measures to end the temporary stage that has started with Oslo. To start implementing the two-state solution by creating an independent, contiguous Palestinian state along the lines of the 4th of June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital. This is the day after that will restore the rights of the Palestinian people, provide security to the Israeli people, and allow all the peoples of the region to enjoy security, stability, coexistence, and cooperation for development and prosperity in line with our common human values. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Selim for his statement. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia chairs the ministerial committee mandated by the Joint Arab-Islamic Extraordinary Summit. I now give the floor to His Highness Prince Faisal bin Farham Al Saud, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia.